Welcome to If You Can't Be There, Be Here, my live stream show that I'm running throughout the Edinburgh Festival in 2023. Not everybody can get up to the Fringe, and not everybody wants to just ignore the Fringe. There's lots of other stuff that goes on during August, but the Fringe for a lot of independent theatre makers is the pinnacle, is the holy grail of being able to perform. And so much goes on. And I've had a couple of guests, and today's guest, I'm really glad she's been able to join me. Now, I'm going to give you a little bit of an introduction to today's guest, which is Morna Burdon. Following a sellout show in the Edinburgh Fringe in 2018, Guy's Piece, which is her show that she has there this year, returns to the award-winning Scottish Storytelling Centre for just 5 performances. So you will have missed one. And as of this going out live, there is one on Wednesday the 16th, Thursday the 24th, Friday the 25th, and Saturday the 26th. Now, Guy's Piece sees Morna take her audience on a journey of courage, creativity, and resilience as she highlights women worldwide who have found daring, initiative, courageous ways to rebel against war and stand up for peace. Threaded with songs and punctuated with humour, it's a moving and timely show looking at how war affects those the women love. Thank you so much, Morna, for joining me for this live stream. And as I was looking through the notes and the reviews, there was one phrase that really stood out to me, just about how beautiful storytelling is and how intimate it can be. And one review from the USA, your show sits at the intersection of consciousness raising and inspiration, and it has never been more needed. And I think that's very true. So welcome, Morna, and tell us about Guy's Piece.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Well, about 8 or 9 years ago, I decided that I was getting piano lessons, and my piano teacher's a wonderful performer as well. He was in the Fringe. I decided I wanted to be in the Fringe as a performer again. I'd done lots of directing and a whole lot of other things. And I went home, found myself a slot, and then wrote the show called Bonnie Fechters, which was about women of courage. And in that show, there was one particular story that was about women in Vietnam who were imprisoned in cages below the ground, in individual tiny cages. And when they were asked by women peace activists who'd come to highlight what was going on, how they'd survived, the women said, we sang songs of hope and defiance. And so I thought I would like to do a whole show about other women peace activists and women who'd been through all sorts of traumas in war, as well as their loved ones. And, you know, at the same time as telling the stories, which are sometimes, you know, there's one story which is on a battleground, and it's very, very graphic. So there's that kind of reality of war, but there's also the hope and the inspiration. And so I love the fact that a comment was about said that it sat in the intersection between consciousness raising and inspiration, because that's kind of, yeah, I hope it's quite entertaining as well in terms of the songs. But yeah, so that's the background to Guy's Piece.
And it's a piece that you've written the stories, the narrative. You write the songs as well, or do you use established songs, or have you written your own songs?
Yeah, the stories are all true stories. I select the stories and then thread it in to make a theatre piece. The songs, some of them I've written, maybe 2 of them I think I've written, and the rest I've gathered, I've found them, and they fit in with the stories. They weren't necessarily written to be with that story, but I kind of thread it together with that story.
Yeah, and very much taking your audience on a journey. So just tell me a little about the audiences that you encounter when you perform pieces. So you perform in arts centres, arts venues. Just tell us a little bit about the venues you go to and the audiences that come and experience your work.
Well, with with all of my shows, that my one-woman shows, then I've performed in somebody's living room. I've performed in theatres. I've performed in village halls. You know, wherever anybody wants to be an audience and wants to come along and see the show, that's kind of where I'll perform. And it's lovely because for me as a performer, it's nice variety. But it's also nice to know that that show can kind of, come and go and fit into different kinds of venues. And the other thing that what I like to do is what happened with the first show, Bonnie Fechter's, before Gee's Peace. Gee's Peace, by the way, means give us peace. That's what it means. And with the first show, I noticed that I stand at the door to say cheerio to the audience. I do my little bow, but then I go and thank people for coming along. And people were queuing up to tell their stories because they had been inspired. And so sometimes I include that in the show. Sometimes there may be a wee 10-minute break. People who want to leave at the end of the show will do that. And other people are invited to stay and tell their stories or sing a song that been inspired to, that they know. And for me, that's kind of my approach to theatre, really. I like that. I like the circular aspect of that because I get to go away feeling inspired. Yeah, a whole range of venues.
Yeah, and your venues, not just Scotland, because you're Edinburgh based or the UK based, but you've been travelling. I mean, I've been seeing your journeys to Prague and to Adelaide. So where have you taken Gee's Peace and your other fringe shows that have been?
Well, Gee's Peace has been at the Edinburgh Fringe, it's been to Prague, and it's been to some libraries in Scotland, and then I wanted to go. I'd like it to follow the pattern that was established by Bonnie Fechter's, which was that, I think I've been to about 30 different venues there, and that included Adelaide, but there was a whole lot of, again, theatres and, little country places, towns. So yeah, that's when I was in Adelaide. It was my other show, Bonnie Fechter's, and I loved that because it was far away and it was hot, and it was a very contained kind of festival, and of course different audiences to the ones that you find here. And then with the visit to Prague in 2022 with Gee's Peace, I very much enjoyed it because of the people who came along. People always have their stories, but some of these people were very directly involved in things. There was a theatre company from Ukraine. There was a woman who'd sang in the Wenceslas Square when Václav Havel was speaking there during the Velvet Revolution. There was a woman who had lost her brother in Vietnam. So these stories meant an enormous amount to them, and that felt really good to me, that it was... people talk about catharsis with theatre, and I think some of that was going on. And so that was a very enjoyable for me.
It's a really powerful experience with live theatre, and so much now is film. You go and sit in a dark room and you watch something being played for you, and it won't react to you, it will never respond to you. Immersive work, which has kind of exploded, you are pushing yourself into this space where it's up to you to drive a narrative and get something out of it as a work. But that observation and that choice to be in an audience and listen to stories and how that resonates with you as an audience is an equal experience. And I think storytelling especially is really good for that. So
I think all theatre is storytelling. The story, what I do is not traditional storytelling, just so people get, folk who do traditional storytelling, there's a very particular technique to that, but it's definitely telling stories. And I think that, it's the whole thing of theatre, the lights go down, it's dark. It's like, if you've got a wee child and, you don't, when you're putting a kid to bed and telling them a story, you do not leave the big light on. I'm not going to, you put the little lights on, you set the atmosphere. And I think there's something very soothing about stories. And I think particularly for me, I enjoy connecting directly with the audience, and also remembering all you're doing is telling stories. So much theatre nowadays can be about, it should be good, but it's not a test to see whether it's good or not. It's a way for human beings to connect with each other through something very ancient, really, and the songs as well. And again, people do that automatically. People, most folk when they're wee have sung away to themselves, and then they learn they can't sing and all of that. But what I enjoy is that, for example, with my first show that I did in August the 9th, at the very end, the audience spontaneously started singing with me. And I didn't invite that. I did not invite it. It just happened. And that's what I like. That is live theatre, but it's also something very innocent about it. People just doing that, you know. And I like also with my shows people coming up at the end and telling me their stories, because there's always another story to be told.
Yeah, being present with other people to share that story, and whether they tell that story when they go home at night, you've passed it on.
Yeah.
You've passed on especially these are other people's stories. Yeah. So
Yeah, and also, I mean,
Edinburgh-
like, sorry, on you go. Yeah.
No. So Edinburgh at this time of year, Edinburgh at this time of year for getting ready to tell the stories. And when did you know that you were going to do the Fringe this year? What's been your journey to?
I think I actually got in touch quite late with the Scottish Storytelling Centre. I think it might have been because I'd been in Adelaide, because I'd been away. And then I came back and did a wee tour up north in the Highlands of Scotland. And so I think it might have been late April or early May that I got in touch and said, have you still got a space? And they did.
And when does it feel that Edinburgh's coming to town, the Fringe is coming to town? Because you're living there all year round.
Yeah.
So when does the Fringe come to town? When do you kind of know that things have started?
It's within the week before it starts, because I was doing some filming actually on the High Street, which is where the Scottish Storytelling Centre is, and that's where the Fringe happens in terms of street theatre and all of that, and it's mobbed. But about a week beforehand, I filmed it because it was completely empty. You know, it was actually empty. There wasn't a lot of traffic even. It was just very empty. And then you sort of start to see people appearing. You see folk taking the photographs, and then more and more. And then you see somebody standing in the middle of the street juggling, and getting people to cheer. And that's when the Fringe has started then.
Yeah. So it's a special time. It's a special time. What happens during your show then? You're at the Storyteller Centre. What's going on at the Storytelling Centre as a venue? What else is taking place there over Fringe?
Oh, there's a whole lot of Scottish and international shows on, from traditional storytelling through to what people might recognise as theatre, but a lot of it is directly connecting with the audience. And I've been to see two shows as yet. But it's always wonderful seeing what other people are doing. There's a lovely one-man show that I saw the other day, and it was just delightful. And it was that feeling of just being taken away someplace. And there's another one I've seen already. I've seen it outside the Fringe. I'm going to go back and see it again. Thunderstruck, it's called. And it's about, although it's a Scottish Storytelling Centre, it's not necessarily all Scottish, although there is obviously a lean in that direction. But this one was actually about a man who was a very talented bagpiper, and that was a remarkable show. So I think I'll go back and see that one. But then there's all the visitors as well, whether they be performers or producers or writers or what I'd call punters, people just coming to see the show, people who always come, people who are there for the first time. There's all of that.
So is there a purpose for you at Edinburgh this year? Are you looking to get anything particular out of it? I know other artists that have talked about having a purpose for Edinburgh, knowing whether you're there for audience or testing out new work or networking or finding producers, seeing where your work can go. Have you got an objective of what you want to get out of Edinburgh?
Well, the first word that came into my head was to entertain people. That was the first, when you said it to begin with, that was to entertain people, and then to find out maybe what it is that the people like about the show. I get people to write on postcards afterwards. I mean, they can go on social media, they can email if they want, but I want to include people just walking out and they've not thought about it too much. It's a completely immediate reaction. And so the point is getting that feedback from people and going, they enjoyed that. Oh my goodness, I didn't notice I didn't know that's what the show was about, from somebody. So I think it's to entertain people, to engage with people, to perform, because I love performing. In this instance, to tell these stories, to sing, because I love singing. And to probably, this one in particular is quite appropriate, because the Edinburgh Festival was set up as an international celebration of creativity after World War II, which had been an international, not exactly celebration, but it was pretty destructive, if you like, celebration of total destruction, you know, and very destructive. And it was set up in opposition to that. And then the Fringe, of course, was to try to include people who maybe weren't so interested in the what you call the highfalutin stuff. And so Guy's piece is probably quite an appropriate one to be doing at the fair. And I like to remember that it is about creativity, is about pieces. It can be about getting the next gig for the performers, and of course it's about folk enjoying themselves. But it is about the capacity for human beings to be creative and what you can do with that when you come together to do with that. You know, it is a celebration of that. And I think when you remember that, then it's great fun. Then you don't mind things like, you know, about the 3 millionth flyer getting stuffed in your face and me stuffing it in somebody, because it's just people, you know, you know, there's worse things to be doing than going around wearing face paint or throwing fire things up in the air.
And this is your audience coming to you, isn't it?
I mean, you're,
you know,
for some people it drives them nuts.
So are you having to do any flyering and promotion? How has the word got out about Guy's piece?
Yeah, well, I think social media helps a lot nowadays. You know, it means that the flyering is still part of the tradition, if you like. If I'm being honest, I think I know what I do with flyers. When I get them, I probably fold them in 4 bits, put them in my pocket, and when I got home, I put them in the bin. So, frankly, but there might be the odd one that I don't do that with. Posters, you know, I'll notice posters, but in a way, it doesn't matter. In a way, that doesn't matter. It's all the enjoyment of engaging with strangers and saying, "Please come on my show."
Partly, right? I mean, the flyer is an excuse to give someone, but just going out and talking to people down the Royal Mile of, you know, why are you here and what have you seen? I know the 2 times that I did come up to the Fringe was as a participant, having a small stipend to see various shows, and I adored it, and I really would like to do that next year with a group of audience who, you know, can't be there. They can be with me, and to go around some of these shows and just pick up the vibe of the Fringe, because there's just so much going on. Do you your show is at what the time of your show, Morna?
It's 4:30 on the days that it's on, it's at 4:30. And it lasts for just under an hour. And then you're in the Scottish Storytelling Centre. It's got a lovely little cafe. So it genuinely is a very good place to have a show on, because it's in the midst of everything. It's quite, and I'm very lucky to get it at that time of day as well, because folk might have seen a lunchtime show, then be going on to an evening show.
Yeah, planning that routine, isn't there? You know, you might get a show in the morning, maybe one before lunch. You might get 2 in the afternoon, and yours would be that sort of later afternoon one before you decide what you're going to go and see after lunch, after dinner, or whether you're going to see dinner. Yeah, just you can see a show effectively probably every couple of hours, and you would only have seen just a snip of the Fringe. It is massive, isn't it?
It is, yeah, it is. And I mean, one thing that I enjoyed about Adelaide was it was quite contained. I quite liked that, and I quite liked, I enjoyed that. But I also can enjoy the atmosphere of the Edinburgh Fringe. I think you know what you're coming to, you know what it is. It is a very big jamboree, there's no question of that. And I think
how does Prague fit into that? Was that, you say Adelaide was quite contained. The Prague, I mean, that's one that I've seen, you know, that's quite a well-known festival too, in sort of in European context. So how does Prague fit into the Fringe experience?
Well, again, I think it's quite contained where it is. You know, it's in a particular area. I mean, with Adelaide, it's very big, but there are 2 main areas, I would say, that it happens in. And with Prague, it's much smaller, and it's just got a different atmosphere to it. It's probably, I think the way that it's kind of promoted is a quote from someone whose name I've now forgotten. That's terrible. Saying, you know, this is like the Edinburgh Fringe in the 60s. What they mean by that is that it's a small bijou, if you like, but there's a lovely, delicate feel to it. It's nice, and it's I think it's intentionally the Prague Fringe. The person who set it up is from Scotland, so it is very much an English-speaking fringe, that particular one, and. Again, just the variety of people. I mean, when I was doing Guy's piece in Prague, there were people there from, well, for example, it was the Pro-English Theatre Company, Ukraine were there, and there were 3 of them, and they had rehearsed their show in an air raid shelter. And so I suppose what I like is sort of like, the real life mixing in with theatre,
Yeah. So you're doing 5 shows. You've done 1. You've got 4 remaining.
Yeah.
Was there a conscious decision to only do 5? Some people are up for the entire Fringe. Some people do week 2 and 3 or week 1. If you could give some advice to someone who wants to come up next year and they want to do it, what was your thinking behind the dates that you did, or you offered them? Just tell me a little bit about that.
Well, 5 is because when it goes up to the next slot, you start paying more money for the venue. So there was
and that's
that.
something to consider, the cost of going to Fringe. Okay.
The other thing is that when I was in Adelaide, I can't remember, like say I did something in the first, I did 2 or 3 shows in the first week. Then I had a gap and did several shows in the last week. And I quite liked that. I got a good audience. It allowed the audience to build. And I also got a chance to relax and to sort of take part as a meet up with people. And I wasn't exhausted. And so that's what I wanted to do this year. So that's why I chose to do 1 in the first week, 1 in the second week, and 3 in the third week towards the end. Because I think it does give a chance for the audience to build, although I was very lucky that I got a sellout house in the very first show. And as it happens, a 5-star review. But that will there then is enough of a gap then, hopefully, for that to filter through and people to look at that and see and maybe be influenced by that. Although what I would say is that what I loved particularly about that 5-star review was that the reviewer from Northwest End UK, Kathleen Mansfield, I thought she did an incredibly generous, and she talked about me being humble, but I thought she did a very humble thing. In her review, she included reviews by the audience that had been there.
Oh, yeah.
And I loved that. So what I'm saying is that that's another thing that I would suggest to people is that yes, of course you need to have the critics and the reviewers there, but check with your audience what they thought of it as well, because they might have a different take on it. So yeah, I wanted to sort of like spread it out so that I could, also because friends of mine would say, I'm really sorry, I'm only coming the first week. Well, they can't say that this time because I'm on every week.
Yeah, just a couple of those weeks. I suppose if being resident in Edinburgh, you haven't got the cost of the accommodation as well.
But I think difference.
Come up for a period of time, as a performer, you want to be able to perform, but it is exhausting to do every single day. And I think when you're looking at social media, there's a lot of that burnout that you can see. And mental health within our industry specifically is a hot topic, and we need to look after ourselves. And so I think before we end the stream, I'm really pleased that you've agreed to just do a little bit of song so we can finish with people hearing what they're going to see or what they might miss. If they can't be there, they can be here. So if you've got any words of wisdom in terms of artists sort of self-care, so what would your first tips of self-care whilst in Edinburgh be?
Well, I think that I would sort of have your feet on the ground in terms of, if you're going to book someplace for 21 days, are you going to get an audience for 21 days? Yeah, even if you've managed to afford the accommodation. And the other thing would be, I would think, is to think what your piece is about and who might come, and target that audience before you come. I think that because then, then you might have 10 people in your first show as opposed to none, because you've targeted them, you know what your show's about, and you've done your research, and you've got in touch with these people directly to say, come along, this, you might be interested in this.
Oh, well, it's been so lovely to catch up with you before the show and hear this with the show, be able to share this with my audience. Do go and see Morna's show. We'll put a link on the screen as she begins. She'll tell you a little bit about the piece, but thank you for watching. Thank you, Morna. And I will hand over the screen to you, and you can perform us out.
Okay, thank you. This is a song I sing at the start of my show. It's by a woman called Nancy Nicholson, and it's called Last Carol. I'll sing some of it. Mushroom cloud and heavy water, my last son and your last daughter, white and sere the blasted ground, Husha, husha, all fall down. Merrily, merrily, nuclear power. Merrily, merrily, kilowatt hour. Merry little factory for nuclear fuel. It will cook your merry goose, not your merry gruel. And that's a wee taster. Thank you.